Hey, hello, and welcome back to Good Knit Kisses. I'm your host, Kristen, and today we are working on the diagonal steep scarf, or the steep diagonal scarf. This is a men's scarf collection. It was actually in the Karen section of Yarnspirations patterns, and I chose it because I think it's very flattering on the face and fun. And there's 6 patterns in this interchangeable men's scarf collection, and so I picked the first one in there. Just happened to be the first one, but anyway, it was my favorite. And anyway, so I taught a video on it last night. It was yesterday. It was uploaded onto Yarnspirations YouTube channel, and I'm going to convert it to you today for the loom. So welcome to Loom Knitting Day here on GKK, Good Knit Kisses. And if you have joined me for the first time, please tell me you're new. And of course, if you are on replay, if you're on replay, be sure and ask me a question by writing replay. Don't catch my attention, and I'll try and answer that later. Thank you for joining me live. If you're here, as always, I love to say good morning to you before we get started. So good morning, Susan. I see Bridget hopping on. I'm so excited to see you guys. This is my little section of Romper Room, apparently. Everybody's told me because I like to tell you hello. So hey Heather, glad you guys are on. Today we are working on this scarf. Woo woo! And this nice and pretty, and this diagonal. So lovely. I love it. I love it. The steep diagonal, and I'm going to get my yarn out to show you. I'm using the Bernat Softee chunky yarn. Nice and big. This one is a super bulky number 6, and so we'll be working on that today. It is in the men's scarf collection. You can make it for yourself or your man or your friendly man or whoever. So I had fun doing it. It normally is the Karen Simply Soft and in the solid and the patterning and all that kind of stuff, but I decided to do it in the Bernat Softee Chunky in the solid, and it shows up really, really well. I really enjoyed making it. And anyway, so I'm going to show you how to do that on the loom. The pattern currently reads 4 needles, but I'm going to talk all about how to convert it, and I'm going to show you today as well. So I'm so glad you joined us. Hey, Angela, I'm glad you came on. And Kay, good morning, Kay. And oh, hey, Karen, I see you jumping on. So I'm getting my yarn ready. I'm getting all set up to show you guys. I'm just waiting for a few more people to hop on. So if you want to gather your supplies, if you want to work on it with me or join me later, this is what we're working on today. We're using this is the old Knifty Knitter style loom, although there are other ones that will get this same gauge for you. If you have a loom that will allow you to get 11/16 or 5/8 gauge, you can do that. What I did is I've got my book. This is actually my own book here, and I'm looking at my my conversion chart for the needle range. The needles that I used are size 11, and so that fits in my chart from 10 to 13, which is size 6mm to 9mm, which fits in a center to center measurement of 5/8 or 11/16, which is in the large gauge category. And if you put the categories in number, you can go extra fine gauge, then fine gauge, small gauge, regular gauge, large gauge, and then extra large gauge. And so when you put them, and then you got 7, which would be the jumbo. So when you put them in order, usually whichever gauge you can do, you can line up the yarn weight with, and then see which yarn to use. In this case, I am using the number 11 needle, which fits in the large gauge, and it will use anywhere from size US 5 to 6 bulky, and that's 10 to 12 ply for the UK or Australia, and that's an average 2 to 3 stitches per inch. So, and all that information, if that's not too confusing for you, what you want to do is on your loom, you can measure using your little measuring tool, and you measure from the center peg, the middle of the center peg to the middle of this center peg. This is an easy way. You can use like a caliber unit if you want, but most people don't have that kind of thing. And then you just measure out what that distance is. If you're using an adjustable kiss loom, you'd have to figure out how many washers and which loom to use. I would start off by using a regular gauge loom and then adding washers to get what you need. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. You're going to need 12 stitches on a large gauge loom, so 12 pegs. You've got, this is the one I'm using today, which is 11/16. If you use a 5/8, you can use this Knifty Knitter 48 peg loom. It's no longer made anymore, but Cindwood Looms makes one that is a good equivalent to that. So anyway, I'm going to say hello to a few more people and then we'll jump right in on the tutorial. Hey, good morning, Chris. I see you jumped on, and Amanda and Linnell, Jill. Oh, wonderful. You just watch. Oh, you have a dog that's not feeling well. Well, Jill, I hope your doggy feels better. And then let's see. Oh, Renee. Hi, Renee and Vesta and Chandra, Karen. Awesome. I think Joanne hopped on. There she is. I'm going to put the link in the comments right now. Let's see if I can get that in here. This is the link to the blog post from Yarnspirations. It's my guest blog post, and that is where you can go click on that. You can see the blog, see all kind of the goodies I gave you listed out for doing it on needles, and then there is a link for the tutorial on their YouTube page, and of course right now I'm going to do it on the loom. So we're going to demonstrate that for you today. I will show casting on. I'm actually going to cast on in the cable cast on. I did not show it that way in the video. I showed the long tail cast on, but I really like the cable cast on the loom. And if you haven't seen it before, this is a good place to start. So if you all are joining me knitting live or otherwise later on the replay, let me know that you're knitting along with me, knitting along if you want to say that, or looming along. And anyway, so I'm going to get my camera ready. Y'all can talk amongst yourselves for just a moment, and let me get these things in the right spot. Got to get my tail of my yarn. It fell off. It fell off the side here. Hold on. I pulled out all this yarn. Good morning, Lori. I see you hopped on. And Martha. Hey, hey. All right. So got my stuff. Okay, I'm going to throw you off just a little bit because I've got my sample already on here, but I'm going to show you with another piece of yarn here how to cast on, and then I'll turn it over and show you the main stitch pattern, and we'll keep going from there. Okay. And part of this I'll use for filming later, so I might start and stop kind of like I'm actually filming, because I'll use part of this for that. Okay. And I'm out of, let's see, gotta fix that so you guys aren't seeing my stuff. One thing that I'm told a lot that I do is that you guys enjoy is showing the stitches off well, and so I want to make this tutorial no different and make sure that I show you the stitches up close. And make sure this is stable and not falling over on me. How's that? Okay. So this is the Softee Chunky yarn from Bernat, and you can get that online. I've got the link for you, and we're going to get started here in just a second. Let me get my sample and get some better lighting in here. Okay, can you guys see that okay for me? Let me know. Okay, so here we go. Okay, Well, welcome back to Good Knit Kisses. I'm your host, Kristen, and today we are working on the steep diagonal scarf, and this is converting it to the loom. You can find the link down below to get your pattern, and I'm going to show you how to convert it from needles. I'm not changing the pattern up for you today because I want you to know how to read the pattern, how to convert it from needles onto the loom. This is a more dramatic version of the scarf. Instead of using the Caron Simply Soft, I'm using the Bernat Softee Chunky for a more bulky yarn to beef up these really cool diagonal angles here. And today we are working on a large gauge loom. This loom is 11/16 center peg to center peg dimension. You can use 12 stitches on any peg that's large gauge. You can also use this 48 peg Knifty Knitter if you have one. You can also get some other versions out there as alternates. So you want 5/8 or 11/16. I'm using 11/16. And my gauge is just slightly wider. You always want to look at the part that's out a little further too, and when it's off and really measure. So it's just slightly wider than the version I made on needles. So it's a really great conversion to use this one. Okay, so the yarn is a super bulky number 6, and it recommends a US 11 needle or 8mm, and you want to use these looms I recommended for that needle size. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over here and I'm going to show you how to cast on. Now you can do the long tail cast on and find the video on my channel, on my YouTube channel. So if you go down the links below, I'll put that in there later on. But I want to show you how to do the cable cast on the loom because I really like it and I want to show it off to you today. So we're going to start by making a slip knot. Any way that you like to do it. Okay, so I'm just working on the other side of this loom right now just to show you, and then I'm going to move over to the other side and continue the pattern on. Okay, so this loom's really great because it's got 12 stitches all on the front. It makes it a really portable project for you to take along. Okay, so we put our slip knot on here, and we're going to wrap our yarn around the front of this peg here, okay, and take our loom tool. And I'm going to go up through this loop here, and I'm going to pull down on the yarn here until I make a new loop. I'm just going to flip it and put it on the next peg. I'm going to take my yarn, kind of pull back at the back like that, tighten it up, get this little tail in here, and now we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to go around the front of that peg. We're making a knit stitch, so we're lifting up the lower loop, pulling down that top one to making a loop. We flip it, place it, tighten. I'm going to keep going all the way down until we have 12 stitches cast on. Okay. Always want to pull that yarn to the back. Get it nice and tight. And I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out because I have the sample on the other side here. If you've enjoyed using the True Knit cast on, the True Cable cast on, let me know and write in the comments below and tell me your thoughts on it. I find it to be a nice, stable cast on. I don't have to tighten it up. It looks really beautiful and no problems with it. It's rugged enough to handle a scarf that gets a lot of wear. Okay, getting there. Okay, whoops, flip that, tighten that. Okay, so I've got 12 all the way down. Now my working yarn is all the way down here, And I'm just going to, for good measure, I like to get myself another stitch here going. So I just put the stitch on top and complete what's called a half stitch. It's just basically, instead of an E-wrap, I'm just kind of going around this way. It's sort of like a unit stitch here, so it's really what that is. So we're just going around like that one time and knitting that, and that way my working yarn is behind this peg now. And so this is now cast on and it's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and flip over though and show you what this looks like. This is this cast on here. It has this nice edge to it. I haven't done any tightening or anything like that. Okay, so it's nice and flexible and stretchy, but it's not super loopy or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to get started on making the stitch here. Just one moment, and I'm going to pull this off not to confuse you with all these extra strands. Okay. Got my ball of yarn. I'm going to drop down here so you don't see that. Okay, so now we're ready, and so I've ended over on this right hand side over here, and this is where I was on my cast on. So this is a few rows in, I'm sorry, not just a few rows in, this is a few stitch pattern rows in. It is a 12 row repeat, and I'm going to show you the pattern here in a second, but I want you to see this nice diagonal that it's creating. So let me flip over to the pattern so that we can show you what's going on. So this is the pattern here. The instructions are a multiple of 6. So if you want a wider scarf, you could use, say, 18, just whatever is the multiple of 6. The right side row, if you'll notice, is on all of the even rows. So you're going to want to pay attention very carefully on the row 1, 3, 5, 7, all the way down to 11. And here's a quick tip on this one. The row below that number is going to be repeated. So you're going to continue the pattern just as you did. So like, I know it sounds funny right here, but what I actually do is I flip the stitches on all the all the even rows. Let me say this again. Okay, so all the row 1s are the right side, and all of the row 2s, all the even rows, are the wrong side on needles. What you do is you do the opposite stitch on the wrong side rows. So a P is a K, so you're going to knit instead of purl. The way it works on this pattern is, so if I have 12 stitches across, I'm going to purl 3, knit 3, purl 3, knit 3. So the last 3 stitches are knit. So you actually end up reversing, going backwards. So you can actually use this part backwards. You can go, okay, knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, purl 3. So it on the front side, it will look the same as this pattern. So basically, it's stacking the look. So whatever you look at the front of your work, these are actually double rows on each other. Okay, so that'll make sense in just a moment. But basically it's repeated across, okay? But you're going to want to pay attention to these first few stitches on each row because they'll change, but your total is the same. So this 1 plus 3 plus 2 is always 6, right? So we'll knit 1 and purl 3, and then the next 2 here get added to this 1 because it gets repeated across. So everything is in series of 6, okay? So it'll be 3s or 6s. All right, let me move over, and now that I've thoroughly confused you, let's go. Let's move forward with the pattern. So row 1, we're going to purl across. The purl stitch is going to go in front of the stitch and down below it. So we're going to scoop up from the bottom, like we're pulling a pearl from the ocean. We're going to pull out that loop here and take it off and put it back on the peg here, and go to the next one and scoop up. Make that purl stitch, pull it off, and put the new one on, So we're lifting that up, doing the purl, taking the old loop off, putting the new loop on, and I don't tighten it too tight. Now, when I'm going to do the knit stitch on here, I'm actually going to do a U-knit stitch so that it's a truer knit stitch rather than an E-wrap. An E-wrap is going to make it too loose and it's not going to lay right. So we're just going to lay that on top, lift the bottom loop over the top, and we have that stitch done. So lifting the bottom loop over the top of a loosely wrapped yarn is going to be our knit stitch. That's also called a U-knit stitch in the loom. So for the people who regularly loom, you know all that, but I'm doing that for the benefit of the other people who are new. So we're going to purl 3 and knit 3 all the way across. Okay. And then we're going to purl 3 here. I'm sorry, we just purled 3. We're going to knit 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we pay attention to the row that we just did. When we're working from right to left, we are working the pattern as it's stated. When we're going from left to right, just repeat what you just did, but backwards. So we're going to go back over it again and knit. Knit 2, knit 3, and a little trick if you're a tight knitter, you can go back and kind of pull on your stitches here to even these out. If you tend to pull it too tight, you can do that way. Okay, I'm going to purl the next 3. So all odd rows are working from right to left, and even rows are working from left to right. Okay, since this is a flat panel and we're working back and forth, it doesn't matter if you start in one direction or the other, but to be close as needles as possible, that's why I'm starting on this side and working this way from left to right first, because that's how I would normally work on the needles. And of course, this is a reversible scarf, so it has a reverse effect when you flip it over. So there's sort of not a right or wrong side once you're done, because it's just a mirror image, but for practical purposes of talking about a pattern, you want to talk about the right and wrong side when you're actually knitting. Okay, so we've completed 2 rows. That was row 2 that we did. Now we're going to look back at the pattern, and the pattern says knit 1, purl 3, knit 2 across. And then we repeat that over our stitch pattern. So we're going to knit 1. So I just did this one. Yes, we're wrapping it again. Now I'm working on this. Okay, now purl 3. I'm working on this going by exactly what their pattern calls for. Now, if you notice that on yours you see the edge stitches aren't as pristine and lined up, that's just the nature of going back and forth from actually working these last stitches. You also can do a slip stitch. You can do a an edging treatment. You could do a garter stitch on the edge and have a few extra stitches, like 2 or 3 extra stitches on the sides to frame it out and make a nice border. If you did that, I would start with a few rows of garter just to get you going. Okay, that's knit 1, purl 3. So we did knit 1, knit 1, purl 3, 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to knit that 1, 2, 3. If this has already helped you, I'd love for you to just go ahead and comment and let me know. And if you have other questions on converting, you can always ask me. I don't convert other people's patterns. If it's the stitch pattern I can help with, I'd be happy to do so. Okay. All right, the first stitch was a knit. Okay, so there was 1. We need to complete that number of 3. So we're going to finish out with the 2 here at the end. So that's what I meant by you're going to be going in 3s and 6s. Okay, because you need 3 knits and 3 purls to complete one of the stitch patterns, but they alternate to get that diagonal. So I just knit these last 2. Now I'm going to knit them again and work in the reverse. So simply all your even rows going back from left to right are all going to be done this way. They're just going to repeat what you just did in reverse order. So when you're knitting on needles, if you went in a circular fashion, you would have to do it this way. And but if you were working, but since you're working on a loom, it actually makes it a little easier. If you ever have a stitch pattern, if you ever have a chart in knitting, you're going to do what the chart reads. So the stitches that show on the front and all the rows is what you're going to work. You don't have to worry about the wrong side rows. But if you start reading the directions will say what to do on the wrong side rows. So you can get yourself confused if you're going back and forth and not remembering that the written instructions are going to talk about the wrong side. However, if it's a circular pattern on needles, then everything is the right side. The only thing you need to make sure is that you know the terminology that's used for needles or for the loom, because the terminology could be slightly different than what you're used to. Most things are the same, but sometimes terms can be confusing, and Google is your friend and those things, and then and ask me as well. Okay, so we're on to the next row. We've already done 4, and we're going to go to the next one. It's knit 2. Now, if you notice the pattern, I started with 3 purls, and then I jumped to the knit. So, because once you finish 3 of the purl, you're going to do the opposite stitch, and you're going to knit 1. Then the next set goes to knit 2, and if you see the pattern, it goes to knit 3. So when we're going from right to left, you're going to remember the beginning of that. So after you do the knit 3, yep, guess what? You go to a purl and you go 1 and then 2, and that completes the whole thing. So if you want to jump ahead, you can totally do that, but now I'm going to go to the knit 2. Knit 1 and 2, purl 3, I'm sorry, I apologize. Everybody who's joining me live, I had my links, my comments were frozen, and I didn't see that y'all were commenting, so I went to scroll, and boom, there they were. Okay, so knit 1, 2, purl 1, 2, 3, knit 1, 2, 3, purl 1, 2, 3, and because we knit 2 at the beginning, we're just going to knit the 1 at the end. So you knit that 1, and don't forget you got to finish out and do it again, because now you're going to work your way back, because we're not slipping that first stitch. If you're new to slipping stitches at the beginning of a panel is basically ignoring it. You're not actually working that first stitch if you did it. Some people call it skip, but that's technically not what it is. So if you want a tip on here, you don't want to mark your loom, because if you mark your loom, you're going to forget that this pattern moves. Okay, so you could try a movable stitch marker, and you could even do one of those pencil grips and cut it to a small size and kind of slice the end of it, and so it just pops on and off. And because there's 12 rows, you could use the first 12 pegs of your loom. And on row 1, you can have it here. On row 2, you can move it here. Row 3, 4, 5, and you can move it on down to remember what row you're on, so you can make your own little row counter. What do you think about that? Tell me in the comments if you think that would help you. And then you know where you left off. I would suggest, though, if you have that on and then you go and leave your project sitting around, you might want to put a shower cap on the top of it or a rubber band or something. Make sure that stitch marker doesn't just pop off if you're just solely relying on that to tell you what your row is. Okay, we're going to finish that out. Knit the last 2 stitches. All right, so now we're going to move on. And see, look, we did the 2, so now we're jumping on to the 3. Knit 3, purl 3. 1, 2, 3. I think I got a little tight on that stitch, so let me even that out. So again, the pattern is going to be found on the Yarnspirations blog, and there is a link. There is a video currently on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel, and I'll eventually have it on my channel, and the link will be there. And we might be able to see if we can get that converted on over through Yarnspirations. We'll have to see about that. But in the meantime, you've got it all here listed out for you. So work all your even rows just as you did working in the opposite direction. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. So we've purled on the last 3 is what we're going to do. So we're knitting 3 and purling 3 in our 6s, multiples of 6s. So remember that even row just does exactly what you just did, except backward. So you're just repeating the stitch. And if you're not familiar with looking at your stitches, look over to the back here, and this is what a purl stitch looks like. Okay, so it's like a scarf. It wears a scarf and it's hugging around the back of this neck here. And then a knit stitch is much tighter, and you can flip that right on over and you can see how that stitch is right here. And if I try and pull a stitch from here, there's not one. See how it's kind of naked? So you know that this is a purl. So this purl, it's from the back side, it's like this, because really you're looking at the V of the knit stitch here. And this one you're looking at the purl bump on the back of this knit stitch. So that's how you can tell on the loom. All right, so let's purl these stitches here. I'll see if I can write this out in the comments, but I want to make sure and let you know where to get the main pattern. Also to get the Bernat Softee Chunky yarn. This is brought to you by Yarnspirations. And so the yarn you can get on the yarnspirations.com site. You can also get it at Joann stores and other stores that carry it. I'm using the solid today. I think it shows the stitches well. When you have stitches that move around like this, the solid shows it nicely. And if you share this video on your social media, of course, it'll come up in your little memories, right? But be sure and save it, and you can save and make your own playlists as well, at least on YouTube. Okay, so we finished those. We're going to move on to the next one. So if you've guessed it, you're going from working on the knit 3, purl 3, then we repeated that, and what comes after the knit? A purl. So we're going to purl 1 and then knit 3. Go underneath that stitch there, make that purl stitch. knitting 3, purling 3. It's like a dance. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And with so few stitches for the scarf, I mean, it's really easy to go, oh, did I do 1 here or what? You know, so I did 1 knit, 3 purl, 3 knit, and, oh yeah, sorry, 1 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, and then knit, see? Knit, knit, knit. And then purl. Again, this loom is 11/16, or you can use a 5/8. That's a large gauge loom. You can also use this super bulky yarn on a extra large, which is a 3/4. It'll just have a different size. So to get this the same size as the needle, then that's why we're using this one. So now we're coming back. So we want to purl 2 because we just purled 2 at the end here. And knit. 1, 2, 3. Whoop. This diagonal pattern here shows up really well in this super bulky, but it looks also very nice in the Caron Simply Soft. It's got smaller stitches, a smaller gauge, and so it has like a finer hand. So you would want to use a smaller loom, less spacing for a yarn weight that's lighter weight. Now you can always use multiple strands on this one. I recommend using the appropriate tool for the yarn that you desire to use. So the appropriate tool would be to change your loom when you change the yarn. And then you get what's best for the yarn. And the hand will feel really nice. Okay, so now I've done that. And we're now on row 11, and we're going to purl 2 because we started with purl 1 last time, and this will be the last time we work in this direction for the stitch pattern. Purl 2, and knit, 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 and purl. Purl, purl, and knit, 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 and last one, purl. All right, so we have finished row 11. You have one more row in that stitch pattern repeat. And here I'm going to make a little warning here. If you decide to start your stitch pattern here again and forget this fact, you will in fact change the direction of your scarf. However, you can do that intentionally and make a zigzag. So that will work too. We're going to go back and we're going to purl. And we're going to knit. But if you make that zigzag, of course, you're not making the diagonal, the steep diagonal pattern. You're making something else. However, that's a little hack or an explanation if you see that your work is zigzagging. And you're like, what is happening to my scarf? It's a design choice. Okay, so the last 3 knit stitches here, and then we'll purl 2. Purl 2, 1 and 2. Okay, so now this is purling 2. We've got the it was about right here. So this is where your 12 row repeat is. I've got 1, 2, 3 12 row repeats here, and then you're going to make your scarf as long as you desire here. So this is the right side of this one with the same cast on. This is the wrong side. See how it goes in the other direction? So when you wear your scarf crossed over itself, it will have this nice mirrored effect. Okay, and then you can also make it short and, you know, stitch these together and have a nice, or make it long, whatever, and make a infinity scarf. That would be fun too. And then you want to bind off in pattern. You can do a basic bind off or bind off in pattern. And what you do is you just work those first couple of stitches and then knit them over the top. You can see my channel and the links below. I'll include a basic bind off. You can also bind off in pattern. So when you see a pattern that says bind off in pattern, if this was a knit stitch before, make the knit stitch. If this was a purl stitch before, make the purl stitch. And then when you move that stitch on over and lift the bottom over the top, you have bound that stitch off in the stitch from the previous. You bound off in pattern, and then you just keep moving this along. So you'll see that in another video. I hope that has helped you today. And if you want to check out more videos on Good Knit Kisses YouTube page, I would love it. Be sure and let me know. And thank you for joining me today. Have a great day and happy looming. Bye-bye. So you guys here who are on my live, you got to see that. I need to set this back up to talk to you. Here, let me angle myself while I fix it. Did you like that tutorial? Was that helpful for you? Did that explain anything on the conversion? And did I miss your question? And you're like, Kristen, let me post my question again because you missed it. I will put that together in a tutorial. You can find it later on my YouTube channel. I will talk to Yarnspirations about perhaps putting it up on their channel as well, or if they can convert that and put that in a written pattern. I don't want to make their designers overstep and do something that we haven't agreed to in in the beginning, but at least the conversion you have here on this video, and it will remain archived on Facebook. And again, you can check the archives. We have Monday archives. So if you go to this Good Knit Kisses channel page, you just click on the Good Knit Kisses, go on the left side of your screen, it says videos, click on videos, and there are playlists. Carol, our buddy up in Canada for Good Knit Kisses, she cultivates that and she curates that. That's the right word. And she's got playlists for Mondays, for Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. So Monday is Q&A, Tuesday is loom knitting. So you want to go to the Tuesday day. Wednesday is needles and yarn, and Thursday is crochet. And then we do have some social media stuff, some help stuff on the Fridays. That are archived. We're not doing the Fridays anymore. So anyway, I'm really glad you guys joined me. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'm going to scroll back through before I head out, and let's see if I can answer that. Sorry, hitting the screen there and it's shaking the camera. Let's see. It looks like Joanne, thank you so much for answering those questions for people. Alicia, sorry it's not written out, but hopefully we can get that written out for you. Joanne, yeah, it isn't the 3/4, it is the 11/16. You could use 3/4 if you're a tight knitter. This one is a 3/4, and you could use all 12 stitches on this. So if you wanted something like super simple to have in your bag, you could do that. I would make sure, and maybe you do a flat knit stitch or something. And let's see. Hey Ada, I see you joined, and Crystal. Hey. Let's see. And you could also do this on the longer looms and make yourself a panel, a blanket. You could do a shawl. this would be a nice, it'd be warm. So you can use a number 4 weight on a half gauge. Yeah, you could, but it's going to be a little open on there, Alicia. I mean, you could do anything on anything. It's just, it's going to make it a more open knit. So, you know, if you want it breezy, I guess, but it shows up better when it's in the correct gauge. And so if you wanted to use the other weight, here, oops, I'm knocking my camera. Hold on while I get my book out and knock the camera all over the place. Oh, hey, Brandy, you caught me live. Hi. Yeah, Nicole, wish you didn't have any other whips right now so you could work on it. Yeah, sorry, but you can catch this later. So, hey, guys, I see 3 people shared it. Thank you so much for sharing the video. Yeah, tell your friends and other groups or whatever. I would love for you to share it. So this is my book. I'm just referring to it, my Loom Knitting Guide and Patterns book. And I actually like to keep it flagged with a little post-it note for just for this. I refer to my own book. It's just easier. But I have like a little bitty chart on it that it gets to be backwards so you can't see it, but it has this needle range on it. And if I use a US 4 weight yarn, you want to do you want to do the regular gauge, the 1/2 inch. But I would definitely test it just to make sure, because some of the 4s can also be appropriate on a small gauge, and some of the 4s it'd be too loose. So, because some of them are kind of light, like they're not all created equal. If you ever do test it out in wraps per inch and you wrap around like a pencil or something and count how many stitches are in those in 1 inch, how many loops, you'll see that some are not the same as others. Some are a little bit bulkier, but they still fall in that category. So the US 4 weight is listed under small gauge looms and for regular gauge looms. So anywhere from 5/16, 3/8, and 7/16 is in small gauge, up to a 1/2 inch and 9/16 gauge looms. So 3/8 is a very general, like most looms that are small gauge fall in that category, and the other looms aren't as much. But 3/8 would be something like the Martha Stewart on the smallest setting, the new Boy loom, the smaller gauge loom that they have. I think they call it the lightweight yarn loom, the Knit UK looms, the of course the knitting board all-in-one loom, and what else? The sock loom 2 is also 3/8. The hat loom on the smallest setting, I believe, is 3/8. And so yes, you could use a number 4 if you wanted to use the Karen Simply Soft. I believe that's a 4. So anyway, hopefully that helps you today. Thank you guys for joining me. Let me know if you have any questions that I did not cover. Write replay and I will try and catch that later. I hope you have a wonderful day. You make it a great one, okay? And tomorrow will be Wednesday with needles and yarn, and I'll probably just do some live knitting on my Trinity stitch on the needles and showing how to do that. I'll be making a video later on making a pillow out of it, and I'm actually knitting up the entire sample instead of just making a small thing. So you'll be able to see that. So that will be available later on Good Knit Kisses YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Go to Good Knit Kisses page if you need to find that, or go to directly to youtube.com/goodknitkisses and hit subscribe. And that way you can get it in your email box. So you guys have a great day and happy looming. Bye everyone. Love you all.